I think I'm here.
Am I here too?
I think we are. I think we're both here.
I hear sounds.
Now, the question is, I did turn everything on and off. This might be a first. This might be a first.
Great. Now it's never going to happen again.
I'm knocking on wood. Bring us luck. Let's be able to do this again one day.
Well, hey, you're here and we're here, and I missed you.
I know. I said that yesterday on my stream. I was like, oh my gosh, it feels like I've been gone forever. So it's good to be back and
Yeah.
yeah, doing our thing.
Things felt weird. I did you watch the stream I did without you?
I didn't.
I I stumbled along. I inceptioned a bit. I did have starting music, but the screen was black. It was interesting, but we muddled along. We made it through. I also have to point out the fact that it is not quite fully dark yet, and it's 7:07.
I know. Yeah, the daylight savings time, man, it kills me, but I am also happy that, it's past dinner
Not
time and not completely pitch dark outside.
Yeah, it's not dark at 4. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very excited about that. Now, on the other hand, I'm a little sad because I get a little sad when we finish a book. And even though I'm kind of ready to move on at this point, like it's been a lot of weeks with this book, and it was interesting, not quite what I anticipated it to be.
Yeah, it was I would say it was kind of like a very gentle story. There was no really huge highs. And certainly there were some lows, but
There was no Tallulah Bottoms, that's for sure.
yeah, I mean, it was, and it was. You and I are both pretty knowledgeable about some of the things that were in it. So yeah, I think it was a great book, and I think for anybody who does not know much history, um, about this time period in fashion and events. I mean, I learned a lot about events as they
Hmm.
pertain to British people. Um, but yeah, I think it would be a great book for somebody that's kind of new to this world. This niche of the Victorian era and clothing and fabric and stuff. I think it would be a really fun read.
I think it's also a good read in terms of illustrating how the study of textiles and fabrics leads you into so many
Yeah,
different things that
yeah,
it's like we don't you remember those commercials in the 90s that was like cotton, the fabric of our life. Like it really is. Like it's really
yeah.
tied into almost every little piece of history you could possibly imagine. I have to say, probably my favorite part was when we were really talking about all the inventions that were coming
Mm-hmm.
out around cotton and making textiles and things, and that big industrial boom.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed that. That was a lot of new information for me. Like I had like those like really bits and pieces, but not kind of that deep dive. And this book made me do a lot of deep diving. Like you were deep diving into the history of Singapore.
Yeah,
You
and
know, like
that was a thing that I just, I mean, I vaguely know. I'm always known about all of these little places all over the world that were colonies. I mean, you
mhm.
can't swing a cat without hitting a British colony like in the late 1800s and or mid 1800s. And so, I vaguely knew that Singapore had been a British, outpost, but just reading what little bit of data she has about that place when in that place was so interesting to me. That was just a piece of history I had never been exposed to. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of pleasant surprises and a lot of
Hmm.
oh well,
Yeah, and
I
I
don't know.
I think probably overall, aside from being able to like actually look at pictures, like when she talked about something, that was probably the greatest part for me. And I was sad that, like I mean, we've said all along, if only we could have seen more. But I think you have a little more, don't you? Did you?
I might have found
Maybe.
some things.
Okay, yeah. So, um, but yeah, I think that was the greatest part for me is just being able to think about like this was a person, and I don't want to like unless you're ready to just start jumping into any of the chapters, but there at the end, Kate Strasdin kept reiterating like we know all these things about Anne Sykes and these people around her, these very intimate things, like literally the fabric that they wore on their bodies. Yet we don't. There's so much we don't know about them.
Mm,
And I think that's true when any kind of research you do, and if you're researching family history, you get kind of the same situation. my great grandmother, as an example, I talk about her a lot, and I really wish I could have known her. And the only knowledge I have about her is just a little bit of family history, and then what my grandmother would say about her. But it's like they could be the nicest people in the world, or you could you could find out like, oh, they were horrible. Like,
yeah, true story. Hey, Janet. Good afternoon, everyone from
Janet.
sunny Monterey Bay. It is not sunny here right now.
Yeah,
but
actually,
it was warm.
It was nice and warm and sunny here, and I hope you're having it's warm and sunny. I'm not sure. I feel like the West Coast is getting East Coast weather, and the East Coast is getting West Coast weather, and it's like we're all confused.
Well, speaking of not being confused, let's just do a couple of announcements. Because I did, muddle through a couple of announcement things without you. Oh, hold on. Oh my God. What are we doing? Stop it. Ah! Okay. It's better when I have someone else to look at to be like, you can see this, right? Like, last time I just had to be like, people out in the void. Anywho, so we're right here right now because we had to do a little, flippity doodah. So next Tuesday, we were just talking about how we're going to do an auction review that you're going to want to come to. I'm not going to tell you anything more right now, but you want to be at that auction review. It's interesting. And it pertains to all these things. And we've got Stitch and Glitch this Saturday. I actually forgot that we had that. And now I'm kind of like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah, no, I had not forgotten. I just know I kept looking at the calendar going, oh gosh, okay, oh gosh. But I'll be here this Saturday, so I'm very excited.
Yeah, that'll be a nice coming together of the friends. And who knows what in the world we could possibly come up with between now and then to look at if we look at anything. But anywho, so we got that as our reminders. And oh, for crying out loud. Come here. And you didn't see this last time, but I quickly threw together this like pretty little vision board.
Ooh, I love it.
When I knew I was flying solo. So if you were here with me last Tuesday, you've seen this, and I announced that Stephanie and I are hosting our first real like official lecture by our super duper friend Pam Weeks from the New England Quilt Museum, because the next book we're going to read is her book Portable Patchwork Here, that you've heard Steph say a million times is one of her favorites. And Pam has those ready to go for you guys at $35 with shipping, including its autograph. And she wants you to email her at pamela.weeks@gmail.com. Just like put in the description, like portable patchwork book or book order or something like that. And then we're going to do the lecture with her on Saturday, April 12th, 6 p.m. Eastern. It's $23. The link to purchase ahead of time is going to go out tomorrow. Steph and I just have to fine tune a couple of details on the back end. And then you'll be seeing that on our social media, so Facebook and Instagram. And then it'll end up in the descriptions of YouTube videos and things. Like, we can come back to this video and even put it in there. And then we're also going to do an author interview with her on June 3rd.
Very exciting.
So, yeah, there's a lot of things going on, for sure. So, that is the end of our announcements. So we can jump a doodah in here, and we've got to start with chapter 17 because we had to skedaddle on that one last time.
Yeah, and now I'm trying to remember. Oh gosh, what did I read? Chapter 17 was a long time ago. So I think the things that I had, I'm looking here, things that I had kind of I think that, so the one thing that I had pointed out to myself in here was on page 226, where she talks about this Mary Ellen Best artist, and she captured a room of chintz covers, long draping tablecloths, and patterned wallpaper. So it's like, so like just Victoriana. It sounds like just drowning in it.
Mhm.
In that last section there, it says so the flower pots were draped and the lamps. There were draperies around the piano legs and around the clock. And there were not draperies. Where there were not draperies, there were bows. The only thing that had not made an effort to clothe itself was the fireplace poker. And by contrast, it looked nude. So I just, I think that that sums up the Victorian period for me, like especially this well, it's this very specific time in the Victorian period where I think that it reached this pinnacle of just like suffocating stuff. Everything is festooned and lacy and beribboned, and they love weird stuff, and which is one reason why I like the Victorian era, because of the weird things. They collected weird things, and
Same.
but all of the furniture, the plant stands, all the stuff. And my grandmother she collected some antiques, and she collected a few of those things. But not to the point that, well, she had a lot of furniture. Like, yeah, that's to kind of pick your way around it. But yeah, you could just picture like in a sitting room of somebody who had the money to buy all these furnishings, and there would be the draperies and the wallpaper and the rugs and all the things. And I think that really well illustrates like what this time period was, what it was like.
Yeah, if we're living in an age right now of minimalist, which I am not that person, then the Victorian period was a period of maximalist for sure. Um,
Yeah.
this this whole chapter, for anyone that's not having their book in front of them, is called Home Comfort, and it's about um home textiles. Not We're not dealing currently with dress textiles. And on page 221, where we're dealing specifically, since every chapter talks about a person or persons, Sarah Newman. And on 221, it's got, Miss Newman's drawing room textile, and there's
Mm-hmm.
a sample in here, which is one of only eight such samples that appear in the book of mostly dress fabrics. I was just trying to look real quick.
I don't think it's in
Um,
here, is it?
I thought that it was, but God, like the writing is just so freaking tiny.
Well,
Um,
there's the reference thing in the
and
back
in the
here, and I don't
background.
remember seeing it. In the
But even with that thing, things still aren't labeled. Um, but I did pull up, because I don't have a ton of particular like notes on this chapter. Because like you said, like we're dealing with Victorian period, there's everything everywhere all the time. But I did pull up a couple of other like reference things. Um, One of which here is the Warner Collection of Interior Textiles, and the other one is Beaton's Housewife's Treasury, which is a book that talks about furnishing your house, published in 1865.
Oh yes,
So,
Mrs. Beaton. If you did not subscribe to her way of doing things, you were not a good person.
oh,
Mrs. Beaton was like she was the I don't know, the Hints from Heloise slash Irma Bombeck slash
oh,
Emily Post of that era, and it was like you do things Mrs. Beaton's way, or you're a terrible housekeeper slash estate owner slash whatever.
oh. Well, let me get that separate. Hi, Jan. Oh, by the way, Janet just said she's going to Virginia next Tuesday. I wonder if you're going to bump into her stuff.
Oh my gosh, yeah, Janet, I'm gonna be I'll be in Virginia on the 21st. I'm gonna be down at the Virginia Quilt Museum. So hopefully Virginia has got good weather the week that we're both there.
Okay. So links for stuff will be in the description later. So this is the Warner Textile Collection here. And it was formed in 1870 by Benjamin Warner, who was descended from a line of scarlet dyers from Spitalfields.
Okay.
We like that kind of stuff. So it's just a menagerie of samples, um, of different interior textiles and things from the time. And this is part of, sorry, I've got like things blocking me. The Warner Textile Archive now houses the largest textile manufacturing archive in the UK, and it's a selection of designs and discoveries and histories of Warner Sons at Braintree Museum. I'm kind of jealous that like I feel like in every other street corner there's a museum in the UK.
I
Um,
don't think it's quite like that, but
Yeah, I also feel like when I was looking through this too, because again, this was a couple of weeks now ago, that one of these fabrics reminded me of something here, and that's when I was like, oh, maybe it was that one.
Three
Um,
pile velvet. Oh my goodness, look
wow,
at that. I have
that's a
never heard of
lot.
such a thing.
Yeah, that's a lot. This one here is really
Oh,
pretty
that's
paper
beautiful. Is that
design.
wallpaper?
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Um, there's a document collection. Wow. Okay, so let me guess. Do I have to click on this thing up top here? That's for, let's see. Do we click? Okay. Hold on. Where am I going? I totally forgot where. No, I think this is the actual paper I was looking at. This is what happens when we don't look at stuff the day that I find it and we look at it later. Document collection, point papers, print sample. Ooh, toile. I like me some toile.
Same.
See, power woven samples. Huh. That looks, it's so funny. That looks really modern to me.
It does. Well, it
Um,
kind of has that like Art Deco,
mhm.
Art Nouveau kind of look. That
Or mid-century modern. Hand woven samples, a collection of furnishing fabrics primarily woven in silk, are a significant resource for understanding the development in interior decoration in the 19th and 20th centuries. Okay, so these are glimpses as to what's actually in the whole big collection. Helios.
it's a company, fabric company.
Interesting. That fabric's neat.
Mm-hmm.
Starlings. Daniel Walters and Son. Wow, that's looking very
William Morris.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty. A whole collection of papers on that. Daniel Keith and Company. Like I don't really I guess I just don't grasp how many textile manufacturers there are at this time. You kind of would think there'd be like a handful, and there's actually like a
Yeah.
lot more than that.
Well, in the Heritage of Cotton, Crawford, he goes through and of course he's not talking necessarily about the fabric manufacturers. He's talking about um, the cotton interests, like where it's been grown, harvested, the bales of cotton itself, and the spindles. So what's being spun into to thread or yarn, and that's kind of what he really focuses on. And at one point, man, that area of England, that's the where Anne's family's from, was
Mhm.
just really. I mean, everybody. Like, if it's no wonder her entire family was married variously to other people in this industry because that's all that there was there. It was like, I'm sure there was the grocer and the baker and the whatever, but everybody else in those towns, from the top to the bottom, was either high up in the cotton world or were basic laborers in the cotton world.
Mhm. So this place even has production records and historic pattern books.
The pattern books.
Wow. Like oh, look at all that. A library. Like this is, man, this is a place to go.
It
Look at
really
those
is.
sample
Now, where
books.
where is this?
So, I
I
mean,
know
it's
it's
obviously
I
in
know
the
it's in the
UK.
UK, but
Oh, oh, look at that. Oh my. I don't even care where it is anymore. I just want to watch this
I want
video.
to go to
Yeah,
there.
I just want to watch this video. Let's see. By appointment, group visits, events. Okay, can I just have an address? Warning. Okay, here we go.
I can't see that tiny writing. Braintree.
Yeah, it's just I don't know how to read
Okay,
that.
let's see.
Look, there's McDonald's. Are you looking on your map?
I am. I've created my. Um. Oh, okay. It's not exactly where I thought it might be. I'm gonna add it to Anne Sykes England so we can look at this in a little bit.
Okay. And then the other thing that I have here is Beaton's Housewife Treasury of Domestic Information. Um, and this was published in 1865. And in the table of contents here, it talks all about the furniture of the hall. There's furniture of the staircase. That's a logical place for furniture to go. But it's probably, I'm wondering if it's staircases that have those cutouts, you know?
Mm-hmm. Like little
Yeah.
landings, that kind of
Yeah, the
thing.
hall, the staircase, and passages. The furniture of rooms used by day, the furniture of rooms used by day continued. Rooms used by night. Like there's very specific rooms here. So let's see. In the hall here, we start on 139. Let's just take a quick peek.
Hi, Tish.
Uh,
Yes, northeast of London. Yeah, that's where I discovered it was. I, for some reason, thought it was like much closer there, but
oh, if that didn't search me in the book. Whoopsie. I thought it did. It did not. Is there not like a just a simple page jump? Is there not really?
no, I think you have to, for this one, you have to go click, 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 click.
Oh my God. All right, we don't have time to do that. This is here though, and I'm going to put it into the description if you guys want to peruse into this. Because like, let's see, what page do we end up here? 5 something. Yeah, who has time to like, that stinks. I thought it this little search that I could just be like, and we could read about, because these are the kind of books that they were using to make their household furnishing decisions on, because that's how we made decisions about everything apparently during that period, was big tomes that people wrote about how to make decisions. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. Let me get back to what I
So,
was.
as for books, I do have The Complete Servant. That is a
Oh yeah.
it's on Gutenberg, and it's on I think it's on Google Books too. But yeah, I didn't have a chance to really look at it.
Mhm.
But I mean, like she says, this is what people should be paid. This is how many you should have, etc., etc. It really, it's a pretty big tome, and I think it's interesting that, you know, I mean, that this was meant, I guess, both for the servant and the household. You know, like, yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but it sounds like it's telling you, you know, if you're going to be a coachman, this is what you need to know, and if you're going to hire a coachman, this is what you need to know.
Oh, you're dropping way down into like 19 now, aren't you? The
Yeah,
upstairs, downstairs.
I'm just talking about in terms of books and
Hmm.
things. Yeah, that book is out there, and you know,
Hmm.
I made a note to myself to look it up. So
Yeah, I have to say, like, the one thing I love about the internet, for all of its faults, making all this kind of stuff accessible,
mm-hmm.
because those kinds of books, like in the US, aren't as easy to find because they're rare, they're much rarer.
Mm-hmm.
If they survive here at all, or for someone that has, I used to collect antique religious texts, um, they're falling apart and crappy.
Yeah,
So to have them scanned and stuff
yeah, absolutely.
is fabulous.
I would much rather look at a scanned book than try to buy a $500 copy of it. You know, and like, that's just not, you know, rare books are just not within, you know, the ability of most people to obtain, especially on the topics that we look at.
I
Um,
will say though, if you ever have the chance to go to like an antique book and ephemera show, they do exist. You should totally go. They're really cool, and you'll find that there is more stuff related to your interests than you would have imagined.
yeah, I was really surprised when you started going to those and started, you know, telling me about, now that you've kind of got the different mindset about what is there versus
Mhm.
illuminated manuscripts. And you're
I
looking
know.
at
Well,
sewing machines.
that here's the thing. Yeah, I used to. There's a really huge one that happens in Boston that I haven't gone to in probably a decade, but I was going there for religious texts and things of that nature. And I don't remember why I didn't go last year, but I really kind of want to go back and be like, do they have swatch books there? You know, like, do they
Wow.
have yeah, like I was never, this thing was massive. It took over a big auditorium. Like I can only imagine what was in
Hmm.
there. And I'm just like, all right, moving on. Let's move on to chapter 18 here
Yeah.
because we have a lot to cover and I have something really cool for us to watch. So,
Yeah.
not in
So,
chapter 18, but we got to finish before we get to my stuff.
so chapter 18, the only thing that I had really pointed out in chapter 18, Sisters in Style, because I mean, again, like, I don't think any of this is boring, but it's, you know, it's not like, you and I tend to have some knowledge about some of these things, and it's just kind of a nice story, you know, her discoveries. But the fact that Anne Sykes has this connection to Beatrix Potter, I was like,
That's the most
oh my
exciting thing
God.
in that chapter.
Yeah, and
Well,
it's funny. Like, I think if you think about it, think about people of means. Probably any major city where wealthy families have lived, they do end up having those connections. You find those connections in their history. So it's not like it's something where I'm like, gasp. But it also is kind of one of those things like, oh wow, like maybe they did meet. Maybe she did know her as a, Beatrix Potter would have been a child, but
oh yeah, she wouldn't have been famous yet.
yeah, that would have been really cool to make that connection. Pretty neat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this one, is really just talking about it's Emily and Alice Burton and Charlotte Dugdale Sykes. And it mentions on 231 here, from 1860s onwards, when Anne had reached her 40s, she lacked the same enthusiasm for recording the fabric lives of those around her, which, as we get later into the last chapters here, she, once they retire and everything, and kind of like she completely stops. So I would say like that seems pretty on par with people's interests in the world. The fact that she kept this diary going as long as she did is wild to me. And it also just, it just really talks about how she had a pretty close relationship with the other sister-in-laws of her life. Whether, and it also just says like, whether by circumstance or she actually really liked them.
Yeah. And that's an interesting question that Kate Strasdin, poses, is like, we read these things and we see that these women shared stuff with each other. And so you're like, oh, well, they must have been great friends. But then think about the people that you are in, like in your community. There's some of them, I mean, like, say in your quilt guild, they might be people that you're like, oh, she's so talented. I like to see the things she makes. I love to take pictures of her quilts, but my God, I can't stand her. It's like, and you just don't know without any kind of evidence about these people, other than these tangible little things that they leave behind. It's, who knows? So.
Yeah, and that chapter 18 is also very short. So I kind of feel like I feel like the way Kate did a lot of this is she put the chapters that has the most information she could get at the front. And as we start to go back, we kind of get less and less information. And I think that's probably a good way to go. If you don't have anything else for this, the next chapter I found very interesting.
Yeah, upstairs, downstairs. And I feel like we'd mentioned Margaret Charnock earlier, and I can't remember if it was Robin or Tish or somebody had said to us, you do know that there's a little thing in the back with the and I was like, oh, okay. And this Margaret Charnock person is, was the cook. And yeah, just reading this kind of as a reminder of what that. And now I'm not a Downton Abbey person, but I do I do have that vague knowledge of the upstairs and the downstairs. And just what I know is like they have a, in a household like this, she would have had a close relationship with the servants because they're there, I mean, it's like you can't necessarily separate yourself from the person that cooks your food, but they're not friends. Like there's this definite social strata there. And I would say in these smaller households, particularly, I don't know. I mean, we kind of talked about this when she was in Singapore. Did they have servants? Were they people that,
oh, is that the part where the cook actually goes with them to Singapore?
Well, in this later chapter though, this later section, I'm kind of like, the dates, I'm like,
well, it doesn't mean it's this cook.
Yeah, I wasn't. It wasn't clear to me, and so, but this woman spent like her entire
20 years.
Yeah, she spent a good chunk of her life with them, and I mean, I don't know.
Well, that
just as an American in the 21st century, I do not have a frame of reference for these kind of relationships. Beyond like I just try to think of people like maybe it's the cashier that has worked at the grocery store for decades that maybe, but still we just, in today's day and age, we just do not have this kind of relationship with people the way, this kind of class structure that they had back then.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned Downton Abbey, because even in this world, they're not a Downton Abbey type of household.
No, I mean
Um,
they've got like maybe 3 or 4 servants at most, right?
yeah, she refers to them a few times as like comfortably middle class. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
guessing if we're talking a Downton Abbey era, they would have been referring to them as upper middle
Mm-hmm.
class. So it would be like small manor house.
Right. Yeah. And based on how
Yeah,
much money
maybe
she
three, four, five
based on how
servants.
much money she died with, they were
Mhm.
not poor. They were definitely
Well, and they
very
didn't have any
comfortable.
kids.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Yeah,
well,
and they didn't have
exactly.
any
Yeah.
kids.
Well, so what were they? They were kind of like the Victorian dinks, right?
Well, I mean, they were. I mean, even in again, we're jumping ahead, but like when we talk about the very end, a lot of how Kate tracks them is by their philanthropic
Mm-hmm.
endeavors.
Yeah.
So because there's not, by that point in your life, you're probably tracing people by their children
Mm-hmm.
and what their children are doing and what their children are saying about their parents.
Mm-hmm.
But this fact of this Margaret Charnock is the only person of this quote class station that appears in the dress diary. And what's interesting is if there's someone that the lady of the house is going to be really close to, and we don't know what the whole other menagerie of servants they might have had is, but in this period, I would actually think it would be the lady's maid. That's the person who the lady of the house is going to spend the most time with. So I find it very interesting that it actually ends up being the cook
Mm-hmm.
and not the person that's going to dress her,
Well, and
assuming she has someone
she may
dress
not have had somebody like that. I mean, it could have. In the description of how Margaret Charnock started was kind of as that like generic maid,
her. Hmm.
like the lower end of the upper class people. And so she would have had to take on a whole bunch of tasks in like sort of being like a housekeeper slash whatever.
Well, and in that, there's a chance that they would have gotten close then,
Mm-hmm.
because if it was someone who was just fastening hooks and buttons for her and not necessarily dressing her, once she enters into like the bed chamber with the mistress, that's where we're going to start to get real close. Unless this woman was one hell of a cook.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
like she wants to
it's
be
not
talking with her
clear.
about.
I mean, it seems to me that when Margaret came to them, she was a cook. She did not make her promotion with them. It seems like she started her life as this like general servant slash household
A
maid.
tweenie. They say that in
The
Downton Abbey.
tweenie. Yeah, the tweenie. Janet says maybe it was the fabric and not the relationship that warranted the appearance in the book. I mean,
Oh, like the fabric was just that interesting?
yeah, how do we know that Anne wasn't like, oh, Margaret or Mrs. Charnock? Wherever did you get that beautiful fabric? Or maybe she gave her the fabric as a gift and
That's
was like,
true too.
my holiday gift to you, but let me get some scissors first.
Yeah, and what else I also found interesting in here was I actually didn't mark what page it was. Of course I didn't. But when they're talking about how jobs that people would take in order to save up the money to make their service clothing,
Mm-hmm.
their morning dress, their morning aprons, and their afternoon, and a black dress, and a this and a that, and then collars and this and that. And I was like, wow, I was always under the impression that their their employers would have been providing at
Mm-hmm.
least the material for that
Mm-hmm.
once you got in. I didn't realize you were expected to arrive with a certain
Yeah,
amount
I
of
agree. I
dress.
was kind of surprised. And I guess it's a matter of like the super upper class, their servants because they had the livery and all that,
Mhm.
those things they like those servants were not expected to come up with their own
Mhm. Yeah, the
uniforms.
ceremonial type
Yeah,
stuff.
but yeah, the day, the middle class sort of daily servants were just like you need to look the way we want you to look. you know?
Well, so it's interesting because you mentioned Downton Abbey. You really gotta watch it. Um, Also, just because a lot of this terminology it's in there. They're
Mhm.
using like correct terminology for things. And there's a scene um during a Christmas special where the servants are receiving their gifts from the family, and the head of the household there, Cora, she hands Anna, who's kind of one of the more kind of main character type servants, she hands her a parcel and says, and then Mary, who she's her lady's maid. She goes, the usual cloth for a frock, I'm afraid, stuff like that. But then they also have like a traditional kind of like maid's uniform that they're supposed to wear, where everyone's wearing the same thing, kind of a thing.
And in my mind, that's that black thing with the
Yep.
white,
Yep.
and your little white cap. And
Actually, it's funny, you see it actually change through a
yes, that's what
couple
I was
of
gonna say. It
decades.
kind of goes
Yeah.
until like today we think of like the French maid costume, like that's.
Oh God.
But it's based on the same thing. It's a black dress with some maybe whites. Well, it would be long sleeve, but
Or that apron,
white,
the white apron
and
pinned
the
up.
apron, and then the little thing. Yeah. I actually, I was supposed to this was going to be one of my last big cosplay things, and then the pandemic started. But I had been working with my friend on a tea party thing for with my husband's work. Yeah, they have it's called Red Dog Lodge, and would have been kind of era accurate here, late 1800s, turn of the century, and we were going to do a whole program there with a tea party and stuff. And I was gonna make my maid's uniform. I had all the black fabric and stuff already.
Who listening thinks that Stephanie should just do that anyways for us? I do.
my little hat.
Yeah, you just have all that black fabric just wasting space. This could be like a Marie Kondoing where you're like, make the fabric into the thing. I fully support this endeavor.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of time. I love making costumes, even if they don't fit me. Like I've made some costume stuff for other people, and I've made a few garments that I thought would fit me and didn't. So I do have kind of a closet of stuff I probably need to.
You seem to make stuff pretty quickly too. I remember how fast you made that dress for the first study center you gave at seminar. That thing was so cute.
Tish said, wouldn't be a new uniform usually passed from one servant to the next. Yes, we want to see that. Oh, you guys, you're gonna add something extra to my to-do list. But yes, I will dig the pattern out and see how long it will take for me to make.
I will say, like, before moving on, because again, this is another short chapter.
Yeah, go ahead. I had one other thing for this chapter too.
It's interesting that eventually what happens is Margaret leaves because she gets married.
Yes.
Is someone not in the house? Sometimes, that's the only way you're really going to meet people is like you meet the other servants that are in there. Which I found very interesting, and I'd love to know more of the circumstances around that marriage because she married pretty late in life.
Yeah, and I mean, to
52.
me, yeah, to me, like anybody getting married at 52 for the first time, even today, is kind of an anomaly. Mm-hmm. For the first time. I mean, certainly I know lots of people in their 50s that are on their second and third marriage.
Right. Well, what's interesting is the butler and the head house lady, they get married in Downton Abbey when they're old and
well, and I mean, and to that you could almost see like that they work together and
yeah,
eventually
they were already married. They're running a house together.
Hey,
but one thing, it's really sad to me that like she gets married, and I mean I don't know if it's a good marriage or not, but then like she just sadly dies 3 years later.
Yeah. And I kind of, when I read that, of course, yes, that is sad. And I kind of wondered, like, is this one of those things you worked so hard all your life and then like maybe her marriage was like a retirement? And I mean, you hear about that all the time. People retire after such a hard, long career and doing whatever, and then they pass away like a few years in, and you're like, oh, they never got to live the life they wanted to in their retirement. So yeah.
But there is also mention in here about how, sadly, a lot of the textile furnishings of the life of service don't exist because, one, they weren't valued originally by institutions collecting. They are more so now, but it's almost like it's too late now. They've been destroyed. They've been used up. They've been forgotten. No one cared. And then these items were heavily used. Some of the stuff would be the stuff that might end up in a quilt because they're like, well, this is all tattered except for this one little piece. I guess it's going to be this block.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, during the era when you did have these big full skirts,
Mm-hmm.
Those things would be used, remade into and remade into and remade into other things. The ones that were like, you know, the silks and the satins and the taffetas and all that stuff, the ball gowns, this got remade into like household furnishings, like pillows and cushion covers and things like that. And yeah, like the cotton stuff, yeah, quilts could be. I mean, in England, though, I mean, we've kind of got just culturally a little bit different during the same time, as women would definitely use that stuff as like scrap fodder here. You know, I mean, nice fabric, like if it's the skirt is still nice and the bodice is just a mess, the skirt could be used to make clothing for, you know, a younger family member. Like, and that's the other reason why, you know, things are often lost, is because they were just remade and remade and remade until there's nothing left and it's just rags.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's,
Well,
I mean,
and
that's
that's
what,
why.
it's the same reason why just any kind of lower class, peasant class, working class, you know, outside of paintings, we really don't know what their clothing looked like.
Well, and thank goodness that a lot of like tintypes and stuff
Mm-hmm.
exist.
Yeah.
Barbara Brackman just posted something today
Oh, did she?
on Facebook,
Uh-huh.
that is, it was from an old blog post she'd done, I think in 2013. She was posting about fabrics that were like Prussian blues and browns, and she shows all these like tintypes, and you can see the pattern of the dress. Obviously you can't see the color, but then she has a
The
picture
actual
of the
swatches.
fabric next to, yes, you can actually see. And I was going to say, like, situations like this, that's why I'm so thankful of the kinds of swatch books like
Mm-hmm.
that museum collection I showed you, that all that stuff still exists, because that's one of the only ways we know that they actually weren't wearing boring, drab,
Yeah.
plain
Brown and
stuff.
gray.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
actually wearing, well, stuff with patterns. So wait, there is one thing in here. Hold on, I did see which one it is. Yes. So Margaret Charnock's dress is on the bottom here. This is the one.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Not the least bit boring.
Yeah, that is, it's a very pretty dress or
Mm-hmm.
fabric. We don't, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
quite know what the dress would have looked like, but um,
Yeah. So yeah, relegating, you know, people of working in service as to
you know
being
what's interesting,
not
and
fashionable.
I did look at this before, but Ellen Charnock is above,
I know.
and she doesn't mention who that is. So I'm wondering if
No,
it's
I
a.
know.
I mean, we're guessing Margaret did not have any children because she didn't get married until her 50s. So I wonder if that's like a sister or something. I don't know. I mean, that begs the question: was there more?
Well, there's stuff even above that says Margaret and Ellen,
Mm-hmm.
but you know,
Yeah, we really don't
it's
know.
just not, yeah,
Yeah,
there's
and
just
I
not.
would guess that Kate Strasdin, I mean, I think she probably wanted to be a little bit careful about, like, when she, like, doubled down on this is who this person was, because it's very hard. It is so hard. I mean, and I've never researched anything in the UK outside of just, like, basic, like, historical things. Like, I've never researched a person.
Mhm.
But they do have the census, like, similar to what we have. But it is so hard going back to this time period to find people, you know, just because everybody had the same names. Everybody named their children after them.
And everybody was related to everybody else.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And, you know, there is, and now I can't remember. I want to say it's probably in the next section where she talks about a child named Elizabeth that they called Lily. Now, Lily is not a name I would immediately associate with being a nickname for Elizabeth. I mean, Elizabeth has,
Usually it's like Liza or something.
well, Elizabeth has so many different, you know, Ella, Lizzie, Betty, like, I mean, so many different kinds of, you know, Beth. Like, I mean, I could think of a million different nicknames for Elizabeth. I never heard Lily. So, you know, there's that situation too where, you know, people go by names that are not, it's not obvious that's what they were really, their government name or whatever.
Yeah, they were just trying to make it difficult for us. I'm ready to push on if you are.
Yeah, because I want to kind of want to get to the some of your surprise stuff. All I have to say about the Brightest of Hues, and you know, for other folks that have read this might have been new information. But I did already know a lot about Perkin and his movine.
If you
And
recall too, that when I was showing books I had gotten for, what was it, Christmas or something,
Mm-hmm.
there's a book about him and the invention of mauve,
Mm-hmm.
or mauve,
Oh.
that has, I mean, I haven't read it yet, but
Mm-hmm.
it has a lot of really good reviews if
Mm-hmm.
people really want to deep dive into him and stuff like that.
And I have the book about Shearer's Green, and it was really more about the well, it got into the fabrics a little bit, but it was more about like the wallpaper
Mhm.
and some of the other goods, the flower industry, making those silk flowers, the green of those silk
Mhm.
flowers and stuff.
Mhm.
Is also a very fascinating book. So yeah, I think that sort of deep dives into these that these topics that are so niche, but they can be so interesting. But what I was going to say about this particular chapter, not so much about the dye, because I kind of, again, I realized this may be new information to other people, but I sort of knew all this. But I thought was so interesting was Bridget Ann Peacock. And she was another person who married late in life, didn't have children, but, they always talk about how, people's names, can kind of sometimes like forecast their future. And you're kind of like, well, is it because people, if your last name is like, I don't know, I'm trying to think, like, if your last name is dentist and you become a dentist, it's because you've been told all your life, oh, well, why don't you become a dentist? Your last name is dentist. You could be Dr. Dentist. I kind of wonder if Bridget Ann Peacock, maybe because her last name was Peacock, she went through life being told or being allowed to be flamboyant because she's a peacock,
I thought that was like the coolest last name ever.
Yes, and also the fact that the Anne writes her name as like one name, Bridget Ann.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas it appears that Kate
It's her middle
probably
name.
found her in the records as Bridget Ann. The Ann is a
Mm-hmm.
middle name, but she
Mm-hmm.
goes by like the whole name together. And I just thought she sounds like an interesting person. A person who appears to be like, early adopter of, these new colored things and
Well, and
just
what's interesting is she, according to what Kate could find, she has no obvious links to the textile industry, like
right,
all these
yeah,
other women did.
right, exactly. And was it Malta? Was she the one?
Yeah, that's where they
Mm-hmm.
likely met. They at
Mm-hmm.
least hooked up in Malta
Yeah.
in 1839 and in 1840, because there's
Mm-hmm.
a diary entry that says Bridget wore this dress in
Yes,
Malta.
that's on page 249. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um.
One
So
thing I
yeah,
find
she
interesting,
just sounds like such an interesting person.
this whole part is really interesting to me because on like 247, Kate points out halfway through Anne's book, there's a shift. The aniline dies. Is it aniline or aniline? Aniline?
I've heard it both ways, and I'm not really sure.
All right. Well, aniline it is then. The dyes become prominent with their haze of purple, and that's very evident. And like one of them is on the same page as Margaret's at the top here
Mm-hmm.
is it does not showing up on screen very well, but this is very purple.
Yeah.
Um And on 248, there's this quote that I love. It says, "To explore the world of 19th century dye techniques is to capture the zeitgeist of a century that was forever testing the untested."
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Yeah, I
that's
like that.
good. Yeah,
That was
I
a
like
good
that
one.
one. Mm-hmm. Let's see. So yeah, this Bridget Ann seems to have been, like you said, one of the more flamboyanty, peacocky,
Mm-hmm. And
peacocky.
it's like you have that friend, right? If you're not if you're
Oh
not the friend, you have that friend who's like, like if I wore some of the things that my out there friend wore, I would look like a circus tent. But this person just can pull off, wrap a quilt around themselves and look like they just walked off the catwalk, and I look like a homeless person. That's who Bridget Ann sounds like to me.
yeah. I wanted to read one or two paragraphs here, just because for people that I honed in on this because again I had bought this book recently, or got this book of William Perkin. On 252, middle of the page, William Perkin was a young chemist in the early 1850s with a makeshift laboratory set up in the upper story of his father's house in London. Only 18 years of age. What is with these men and like doing ridiculous things at the age of 18 when we
Mm-hmm.
compare it to today?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my. Only 18 years of age, he had been working on synthetic, is it quinine?
Quinine.
Quinine?
Mm-hmm.
So that the treatment might be, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry, he was working on synthesizing quinine so that the treatment might be more readily available as a treatment for malaria.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other really interesting thing that constantly happening at this point is
Yeah.
we're inventing something while trying to do something else.
Mm-hmm. And the
Um,
interesting, I mean, there's a whole interesting, there's lots of interesting history on quinine. The fact that tonic water has quinine in it, the gin and tonic came out of British colonialism in India because quinine is not a cure, but a remedy for the symptoms of malaria. So
Interesting.
that's why the British, whatever they were, the colonels and the whatever, the colonists over there, they were having their gin and tonics because it had quinine in it. I
Interesting.
don't know that it was helping them any, but
Well, it goes on to say coal tar was one of the ingredients that was central to his thesis, the addition and subtraction of substances forming part of his experimental alchemy, one of which was aniline. Whilst the synthesized quinine evaded him, the residue from his trial with aniline, a substance that one of his
purple sl-
detractors was
purple
to call
sludge.
purple sludge, would make his fortune. Perkin noticed that this byproduct dyed cloth a solid and vivid purple that did not fade in sunlight or when washed, and he began to wonder if there might be a market for such a product, recalling later, after showing this coloring matter to several friends, I was advised to consider the possibility of manufacturing it upon the large scale. He contacted large dye manufacturers and received encouraging feedback. Buoyed by the responses, he acted to protect his invention, and in August 1856, still
Still
aged only
18. I
18,
know, I know.
he filed a patent for his miraculous dye, Movine.
First of all, Movine. I mean, come on, it sounds awesome.
I mean well, it's interesting to me too that it later for us in the 90s becomes mauve, which is more pink, in
Yeah.
my opinion, a pinky
Mm-hmm.
purple. And man, did mauve dominate the 90s. My entire bedroom was mauve. My rug was mauve. My curtains were mauve. And I was, a little like teenager in my mauveness.
I had a lot of dusty pink and colonial blue growing up.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, the mauve is an interesting color. Like what we know of mauve as mauve today. So
Mhm.
Robin said doctors are still prescribing quinine water for elderly people with leg cramps and restless legs. Oh,
Oh my
interesting.
God, I have restless leg
I
syndrome.
too. Okay, so let's go
Oh.
get some gin and tonic.
Right? I guess is that going to be like another like experiment that we do?
We should. Oh, I missed it. Robin said she has a cousin Elizabeth that goes by Libby. Libby, there's another.
Never heard that one
Oh, see,
either
and
for
I have Libby is another one that's like Elizabeth. Elizabeth, the diminutives of Elizabeth. There's probably 100.
oh, interesting. Now, one thing I didn't like particularly pay attention to super in this chapter, just because I had to get a move on here, was stuff talking about arsenic and the greens and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
and the
But I thought
Mercury.
that this arsenic waltz
Yeah.
was pretty awesome. I did make a note here about, the Mad Hatter and the
Hmm.
connection to Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland because it coming from the mercury, which I didn't know how the mercury was used, so I did make a note of the mercury poisoning that was characteristic of the Hatter's trade because it was used as a
It's like
cheap and
just
quick way of turning tougher,
tougher.
unworkable furs
Hmm.
into viable material, which
Yep.
I was like, who would have thought that would have happened? I would have thought it would like eat it, but
Yeah, and Mercury's an interesting one because they use Mercury in a lot of in like medical stuff. I want to say the Mercury, isn't it the Mercury cure? It was, I can't remember if it was for syphilis or
yep.
something. Yeah,
Mercury vapor.
yeah, they did
Mhm.
some, yeah.
Which
Tooth
is
that tastes
interesting
awful.
because if I recall, like we're getting like off topic, but I'm just gonna, if I recall, like none of that actually cured
No,
syphilis.
no.
So like it just kind of maybe like dissipated the symptoms, but I'm like,
Mm-mm.
So everyone was just dying of syphilis all the time,
Yeah,
going
and I'm
crazy.
not sure exactly what it did exactly, but I don't know if it like ameliorated the symptoms or something, but it did something. I'm not
Apparently, it gave the illusion of curing,
the
is what
illusion.
it
Yeah.
did.
Jan says, "Love a good gin and tonic." And you know what, you guys, I'm going to be going to Festival of Quilts in Birmingham this summer, and last time we saw our friend Mary Fons there, she was passing by a gin and tonic like booth. So I'm like, have you ever been to a quilt show where they had a gin and tonic booth? No, you probably
You're going
haven't.
on you're going on a really structured tour though, right? So
I
you can't
am.
like bypass and go to any of the cool places we've pulled out while we've
No,
been in.
unfortunately I can't, but I am. Interestingly, I am going to Liverpool. We're doing it from the Beatles. Like, look, this is where John Lennon was born. But yeah, I'm not going to go to any of like the super fun. Well, I will be going to super fun things.
No, but I was just gonna say,
I'm
like, you can't
Yeah,
take like a side tour to
no,
this collection that has all this textile stuff, can you?
no, not unless I
Bummer.
add days or whatever. So yeah, I'm
Bummer.
very excited about it. But so I don't know if you had anything like major for the last chapter. The only thing I really had for the last chapter was like specifically where she died, because I was like, I've never heard of this tiny bisfum. Never heard of that, and I
No, the
also
only thing,
was again trying to figure out like where things are.
yeah, the only thing I really paid attention to in the back here is she's really just talking about the fact that once Anne and Adam retire to a place called the Knoll, at this point she is no longer filling the diary with fabrics, despite there still being room. I'm like, how is there still room? Was this book like,
Well, it was a
um,
ledger, so it seems to me that yeah, it probably was a pretty thick book in the first place, and then she just
well, and it was obviously like, getting real as she's starting to like put
mm,
fabric and stuff in it. But yeah, she really is just kind of talking about how there's not a lot about them, and she's tracking them through their kind of philanthropic endeavors. And I will say, like, it was very interesting because she does talk about literally tracing their steps and going to towns. She does go to the house that they lived most of their life
yeah.
in and knocks on the door.
I know.
And the
Every
person's like,
time
come
I
in.
know, every time I hear about somebody doing something like that, I'm like, it's so cool. Now, I live in an old house. If one of the former Now, there are several families that lived in my house for long periods of time.
Hmm.
But there's a certain group of family that if one of their like kids or grandkids came and was like, hey, can we see? No, you cannot come in this house. I'm sorry. It's a
You're
mess.
like, I need
No.
6 months notice.
Yes. Sorry. But she cannot come in here. But people do that. And I don't know. I would have to like email, send a letter, call first. Like, I would not just walk up to somebody's house and knock on the door and be like, hey, can I see my old bedroom? Or whatever.
I'm thinking about when, for anyone that was around, when Mary Fons was doing her Quilt Nerd, and she was talking towards the end of her streaming days that
Yeah.
she was researching Bertha Meckstroth, and
Mm-hmm.
her and Eric drove by the house, and she
Yeah.
was just like, I kind of want to knock on the door.
I feel like, I guess I feel like there's some, I guess, localities that, like probably a small town, you probably could do that. People wouldn't, but like where I live, people are very, very like, who are you? Why are you knocking on my door?
Well, and that's part of it, I think. I'm wondering if maybe in England people don't hate their doorbells as much as we do here in 2020's USA. Like, like we hide from the doorbell now.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the 90s, you just answered the door.
Mm-hmm.
And, all those jokes about making sure you had Entenmann's around in case guests just showed up. So, yeah.
Yeah, my grandmother was always ready to receive a
Mhm.
visitor. In worst case, she had to put out
And
something from the
and
icebox.
even at a young age, I was like, I am not going to be like that. Slam. Doorbell, everybody hide. Don't let them know that we're
So
here.
I want to get to the thing that you have, but real quick, Let's look. If
Mm-hmm.
you're like me and you have a difficult time imagining where things are, even in places you've been, let's see. I got to do my sharing a weird way. So,
Yeah, do your weird sharing.
okay. Sorry, you got to look at my. There we go.
Hi, Kenny.
I'll put me and you over here. Down here, down here. Okay. So, we're looking at England, the UK. And of course down here is London. And while you were talking, I put Spitalfields in here just so we could see that. And then Braintree, like this is all London and its outer areas.
Uh-huh.
But Anne and her people are all from up here. So this is Clitheroe. So that's where she's born. I put Yorkshire in here because I think Margaret Charnock was from Yorkshire originally, I think. So I put that in here just to kind of give, because like Yorkshire is a kind of a major area. So Clitheroe, and then Lancashire. I also mentioned Lancashire is very important in the textile industry. We have Salford down here. This is isn't Salford where they returned to? I think after they came back from Singapore and China. I think Salford's where they returned to.
I don't remember. Did you happen to look to put in Manchester too?
I think Manchester is, where is Manchester? It's in this general vicinity.
Oh, Tish said, I love Festival of Quilts. At Festival of Quilts, you can have a baked potato for lunch, and the lemon muffins for tea are so good. At 11 a.m. and 3 p.m., the floor clears and everyone goes for tea.
I love that.
And then Robin said, like in the movie Murphy's Romance, they lived out in the country, and one of the unwritten rules was you were up, dressed, and coffee ready on, and the house picked up for visitors by 10 a.m. Yeah, I'm never living my life like that.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, so Manchester. Let me get that in here because, yeah. Okay, so Manchester, Salford is like right over here, and Manchester is like the main. So I guess they were like in a suburb of Manchester. But
You know what? This whole time I thought Manchester was a seaside town.
no. And then let's see if we go back to Anne Sykes, England. This is where they ended their life here. Oh, that sounds awful. This is where they lived in their old age. And this is on the they didn't end their lives. Their lives happened to end here. But like, she's mentioned Blackpool and Liverpool. And Liverpool's like down here.
Mm-hmm.
But this Bispham, I mean, they are literally like right on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the other thing that's interesting is she says something about, I can't remember the way she says it, something about the sea. And I was like, that made me for a moment think she's talking about over here, like this side that is close to France and Belgium.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason I thought that might be what she was talking about. So when I looked at this and I'm like, their last residence was not on the North Sea. It was here in this, like, facing Ireland. Mm-hmm. So I was like, did I just read that wrong? Or I'm just really bad with geography, so I think I may have misunderstood it. But
I mean, when it's the same as when you and I try to think about the Midwest of the United States. And like, because we live in such a weird place where there's a lot of states close together, and it is not that way in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, oh, this is over. I thought this was way over. I mean, that's
yeah. No offense to our Midwestern friends, but all your states are square, and we don't know where you are.
We don't know which square is yours.
I've been to some of those square states, but alas, I really don't know where most of them are. If I have to pick them out on a map, I really struggle.
All right. So are we ready for the end of book goodies? Okay. So, if anyone remembers, I was like, oh my God, there's a QR code in the back of the book that went nowhere.
That's a bummer because she did not write this book that long ago. So,
well, I think I found it. So I was searching her, and this is Penguin. And this is Penguin UK, and it's
Yeah,
and
it's
I
yeah.
saw it. I thought it was I thought this was just like an article about it, but the stuff in here is different.
So it's extra textiles.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
wow, that's just whatever those are. That's pretty.
No, let's see. Can I open it at all? I didn't like venture. I try not to. No, it doesn't look like I can open it all. So, peeps, if you want to look at this, open it up on your phone and take a screenshot so you can like blow it up. I'll have to do that later. But remember, all this stuff will end up in the description. But like this blue plaid, I was like, yeah, this has to be different because I don't remember that, and I would remember that.
Yeah, that one up above, that one at the top with that
Yeah.
like kind of abstracty looking floral stuff, that I would have
Mhm.
remembered that too. That looks,
Mhm.
oh, gosh, that could be anything, I guess, but it almost
Well, and
looks.
because we can't blow it up, I mean, like the print on this,
Mhm.
the print didn't get any better on these. Let's see. This page, let's see. The top of this page was worn by Anne's sister-in-law, Jane Sykes, in 1836 for her daughter's christening, and it sits above a pale lilac of Jane's wedding dress. Wow, a pale lilac wedding dress.
And surrounded by
Surrounded by
Charlotte's childhood frocks. So that blue plaid one then might be um, a, one of the childhood dresses.
Yeah, this one over here I can clearly make out Charlotte.
Hmm.
Yeah, actually no, this says Charlotte too.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh my God, I can only imagine what a dress like that literally looks
I
like.
know, and just think, I mean, that back then they really did dress children as miniature adults in a lot of ways. So even as a child, she would have had these very nice looking dresses.
So this, what does it say? Jane's something 1846. That
That's
is a very,
that's pretty bold.
yeah. Do you think it's probably an interior fabric?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could be a dress fabric though. I mean, the way that some of these things are described, and then what I've seen outside of this story, some of the fabrics were really wild. Like.
Well, and this one looks like a really big piece.
Hmm.
Like it's taking up like a whole, oh, here we go. Like bright bold dominates the whole page. Jane's celebrated blue dress from 1846. Why it was such a celebrated dress, we will never know. But Anne's inclusion of it, along with the caption, signifies a memorable garment.
Yeah, and I mean just the boldness of it. I mean that it seems to me.
hmm I really like this blue here. Oh my God, it's pretty.
Yeah.
Um,
Are those more of Charlotte's dresses?
See, a snapshot of domesticity is captured by Anne on this page. The four swatches include neck ribbons worn by Anne and Fanny, mourning shawls, and the fabric chosen to cover Miss Taylor's rocking chair.
Hmm.
See, like these little like added little things at the bottom would have been really great in the actual book.
Yeah, and not have to flip back and forth. So I'm wondering, these are the neck ribbons. No? I didn't think there any in that upper one that looked like
Well,
anything that was. Oh, I don't know. I guess they could be.
yeah, she seemed to be putting them
Okay, yeah, it's
underneath.
at the bottom. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing. Yeah, because I think this might be the chair. I don't know. Let's see what this one underneath. This one's because this one looks like a lot of ribbons too.
Mm-hmm.
Across 14 different samples on a single page, Anne captures a slice of her life in Singapore. Cottons and silks are captioned with the names of her friends in the settlement. Mrs. Ballastier, Fanny Taylor, and Mrs. Brennard. Ribbons of friendship
Yeah.
abound. I'm guessing that's
Yeah, I
because
feel
again,
like
we can't.
everything that's got kind of like a little like that. I guess that faded purpley. It looks like it's got like a little selvage.
Mhm,
I've realized a lot of those even in the book are ribbons and not
mhm,
fabric swatches. Oh, look at
mhm,
those. Oh, I like that
mhm.
blue. It looks like beads.
Yeah. Although this one with like a green snake looking thing is kind of cool.
Hmm.
The complexity of printed cottons is illustrated in garments that belong to Mercy Taylor. Vibrant shades that appear curiously modern despite being created almost 2 centuries ago. I don't think she talks about her at all in the
Yeah,
book,
that
does
name
she?
doesn't. Yeah, that name's not
But
ringing a
maybe it's
bell.
because
Nope.
she doesn't know anything about her. Because,
Mm-mm.
man, Mercy Taylor, what a name. Ooh,
I don't
here's like
know.
a.
You can't. You really can't beat Bridget Ann Peacock.
Well, her best friend could be Mercy Taylor. And of course, I think, oh, mercy, mercy me. Like, That green in there is really
Mm-hmm.
cool. Anne bought this bright pink check sash from Miss Brennard's smallware shop. Oh, we talked about her. In
Mm-hmm.
1847, one of her later purchases during her time in Singapore. The three swatches form a bright panel in pink, green, and brown. Oh, look at
Look at
that.
that. That's gorgeous.
That's really pretty. And look, it's got like this all this tiny stuff on the side here too. Oh, I like this red
Oh, that
too.
yeah, that red is
I think that's a
juicy, juicy
silk.
red. Yeah, you know something, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't see anything about how these were applied to the page. Are they glued down? Like
I
what?
didn't see anything like
Yeah,
that
what
either.
I'm curious to know. And I mean, this that red you could kind of see. It's almost like there's a shadow of something, maybe that leaked through. So I'm assuming that it's
Mhm.
just whatever
It's
kind
got
of
to be like a glue.
paste or
Yeah.
glue. Yeah, but I'm curious to know what it was. It's interesting.
Interesting. So wait, she said this says two large samples of bright silk. That top one is a silk? Interesting. It doesn't look like
Mm-hmm.
a silk to me. It looks like almost linen-y.
Yeah.
But you can see some of that here too. Some of that bleed through that you're talking about. See
Mm-hmm.
right here?
Mm-hmm.
Like she took that, that dip glue they'd
Yeah.
use with that brush.
Mucilage. The
Yeah.
mucilage.
Um,
Um, yeah, so these are okay, so these are more of the Singapore.
yeah, bright silk attests to the variety of Anne's life in Singapore. She had access to the merchant cargo that would have included bolts of silk from India and China and fragments of which she included here. Now we're gonna get a little darker. Oh, this one's very
Oh
interesting
yeah,
here.
I didn't see right away that had that.
Yeah, it's got like a leaf in it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Oh, lots of plaid. Yum. Many swatches belonging to Hannah Wrigley, we knew she had a lot
Hmm.
in here, are arranged in a dense pattern. Some are labeled a family affair, a
That's
private
right.
joke that might refer to garments handed down to family members or more relaxed clothes for domestic spaces.
Yeah, that's right. She wasn't exactly sure what that meant, but it seemed like an inside joke of some sort.
I think it's so cute how she like arranges this stuff.
Yeah.
This blue. Oh, this
Hmm.
blue.
All those little tiny ones at the bottom too. Those are interesting. I wonder if those are ribbons or
Mhm.
if they're just little small swatches.
What
Arab
do you think?
silks.
Saeed Omar was a merchant trading out of Singapore and an associate of Adam Sykes. The display of Arab silks are captioned by Anne came from him. They are displayed beneath the colorful waistcoats of another merchant, Mr. Bergeist.
Bergeist. Yeah.
Now we're going to get into
Oh, these are
black
pretty
lace.
lacy. Lacy stuff. Pretty.
Mhm. A mix of black and white laces, including some broader flounces and some narrower trims. Lace was an important decorative fabric throughout the 19th century, and it's where my own journey
Yeah, that's
toward
right.
hand Sykes
The lace
began.
making. Mm-hmm. The
Hmm.
lace making class.
Oh, I love this. This is fabric I would buy today for quilting.
Yeah, and I feel like I've seen maybe not in that bright like those colors, but I definitely seen that sort of that. What do you call that? That jaggedy like meander. I feel like
Yeah.
there's lots and lots of fabric reproductions that look like that, like in
Hmm.
brown and blue and all the colors.
Yeah. This one's two more examples of the international fabrics included by Anne in the album, charting her the materials that cross that's written weird. Charting the materials that cross her path in Singapore. Um, green. This
Ooh,
fabric
these are
is so
fun.
weird to me because it looks like it's not in focus.
Mm-hmm.
But these are, oh my God, these are like kind of electrified down
Yeah,
here.
I know. That one in the middle, I wonder if that, well, scroll down and let's see.
Like
I
it's
don't,
hand painted
yeah,
fabric.
well, just exactly what it is. I don't want to assume that.
Miss Garnet is an unknown figure in the album. A number of pages include her name, but there is nothing else to suggest her connection to Anne. Fittingly, her fabric choices were jewel-like. Who was Miss Garnet in her bright silk dresses? But yeah, you're right. This could definitely be hand painted, the way that it kind of bleeds.
Yeah, or I was even thinking like some kind of, um, like like an upholstery, like some kind of housewares fabric that maybe has a, I don't know.
Ooh, look at
Now these
these.
are interesting. What is that middle one? That looks like something out of like, like out of the 90s, like the 1990s.
Mrs. Seddon is another person whose name proved untraceable, but whose, God, she tried to find all these people, but whose wardrobe leaps from the page. Hers was especially bright, including a zigzag printed gauze that is almost psychedelic.
Yeah. Wow.
See, I was under the impression really that what we have in this book here are just the people she's been able to find thus far. I'm like, wow, did you spend time on a bunch of other people that went nowhere too?
Well, I
Like,
mean, she did this research for, I can't remember the dates she said in the beginning, but I want to say it was like 10 years
hmm.
or more, or 8 years.
Oh my God,
it was
this
quite a long time.
I have fabric that looks just like this. Like, Anne's relations from home sent her a variety of materials from their own wardrobes. Here, Mrs. Gregg and Alice Burton are featured with florals, stripes, and checks. This one's pretty. Looks like a Christmassy fabric.
Both of those
1859.
are pretty. I like that brown one too. Or is
Ooh,
it
I like the
black?
purple on the bottom.
Can't really tell.
It looks bracket blackish brown.
Mm-hmm.
By the 1860s, Anne and Adam were living in Coldhurst Hall near Clitheroe. Above two floral fragments, this wax cotton rose print was chosen for the drawing room at Coldhurst.
Ah, okay.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, that's interesting. That blue. Ooh, look at that black.
Ooh, that's almost like a toilish kind of thing with that,
Mm-hmm.
or some chinoiserie.
Anne's placement of the swatches was less careful by the 1870s. She was just like, the large brown and white floral. Oh, it's brown. It looks black here. The large brown and white floral sample here refers to Anne's polonaise.
Polonaise, yeah. That's the one
In
where the skirts are hitched up, kind of.
okay, in 1873, one of a few times an actual garment is described.
Yeah, Robin confirmed she was gifted the book in 2016. So, and I think the book was published, I think it was 2023, I think,
It's
in the UK. So,
2022.
yeah.
Oh, I think it's 2022.
She
Yeah,
mentions,
2023 is the US copy.
oh, okay. She mentions 2022 in the book. So,
Yeah, that is the end of the additional swatchness. Now, aside from that, I also pulled up her Instagram account, which has lots and lots and lots of stuff. I only looked through it a little bit, but one of the things that's on here is this, which isn't our time period. She says this, let's see, today's second year focuses on the role of the skirt and includes a Dutch liberation skirt when Dutch resistance remembers I'm not even going to try to say that name, was imprisoned by the Nazis. Her friends managed to smuggle a scarf of fabric scraps to her. This inspired her project to encourage women after the war to make skirts from pieces of loved ones' clothes. So she has all kinds of very interesting things in here. So I highly suggest that people follow
I think
her.
Kate Strasdin, she would be a quilt nerd. She would fit right in with us.
Yeah, like look at some of this stuff.
Gorgeous. Absolutely
1890
gorgeous.
gown. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
I'm gonna have to follow her.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, what
She's got
gorgeous stuff.
yeah, if you it looks like I mean, she's just a museum of fabric and like look at that.
I know. Look at that thing. Oh my
I'm
goodness.
very itchy right now. It just looks
Oh
very
yeah. Like, I mean, can you imagine? Well, even that other one that we're seeing the back of with that big collar.
this.
Yeah.
Hmm. Or like look at this velvet here. This looks like something out of Downton Abbey, like
Mm-hmm.
that the Dowager would have worn.
Yep.
Um, yeah, she's just got like even like this.
A stomacher, yeah. Oh, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Oh, I can't wait to look at her Instagram. And I
Yeah.
said to Jill before we got started, when Jill mentioned, I have, a couple things to show of Kate Strasdin, and I was like, oh my god, I cannot believe I did not Google her and find out if did she have a website, did she have an Instagram? Like, what is wrong with me? you know.
There I will say she's got a lot of 170,000 followers too. So yeah, this link again, unless you guys just want to go find her right now. I'll put this in the description later. One other thing that I found is an interview with her about her book. There are others. So there's one here, but they're all an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So there, if you want to look, there's quite a few other interviews with her. They're just an hour. This one's 15 minutes. So I was like, this one is doable for our purposes.
Yeah.
Now, let me make sure. Did I share my
Oh, Tish, I'm
sound?
glad you thought it was interesting. Yeah, I was unsure because I know some of the history in here are things that, those of us who've been around a little bit, we kind of already knew a little bit about, but just from the I don't know, from the perspective of like learning about this woman and doing the detective work, and she doesn't really describe her research process so much. I think it could have been boring if she did that, you know.
Mhm.
But yeah, I just so fascinating. So yes,
Let me just
make it big and let's hear what she has to say.
let me make sure you can hear it.
So I'm now going to speak.
Can you hear it?
Yeah, I can hear it. Yeah.
I did share my sound.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
I thought I hadn't clicked it. Can everyone else hear it too?
Monmouth University, and she's a fashion historian. And once you discover what she's been up to over the past few years, I think, like me, you're going to feel a little bit
Can you
jealous.
turn it up any?
It's from back 6
Mm-mm.
years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and indicate
I'm up all the way.
Okay.
Is there a chance I didn't share my sound?
I don't know, check, because it's very. I mean, I can hear it, but it's very faint to me. It's like I can't quite hear her.
Hold on one second. I'm just going to stop share for a second and try again to make sure.
Robin said she could hear her, but
Let me just make sure that I'm okay. So I definitely clicked share sound that time. Tell me if this is better.
Kate's hands came an extraordinary Victorian journal, which had been kept by a woman called Anne Sykes. And Kate, could you want to tell us about how you came upon this journal and what it is that's so kind of almost not unique, but certainly extremely precious about it?
Yes, it is a really rare treasure. I, for many years, been a lace maker and would go down once a month to a local group, which was full of women who are much older than me, much more experienced and lovely. It was like a real breath of fresh air. And after one of the meetings, one of the ladies, came up to me and said that she had some things that she wanted to get rid of. She'd been
Isn't this the story of our life as like young quilt history buffs? Is our older friends that have collected things and are like, hey, do you want some stuff? And we're like, yes.
She had worked in the theatre world in London in the 60s and so had amassed all sorts of things from that time. And the very last thing that she got out from a trunk at the bottom of her bed was this parcel that was wrapped up in brown paper. And she said, oh, this was given to me by somebody that used to work for me in the theatre. And he had found it on Camden Market, just on one of the kind of junk stalls there, one Sunday morning, and he paid not very much for it, and he gave it to her thinking it might be useful for the theatre wardrobe because it was full. It's an album full to bursting with fabric swatches stuck onto every page, and she knew nothing about it. It didn't have any provenance. It was completely anonymous, and she'd never really known what to do with it, and so she gave it to me.
Yeah, and for us, so as family historians, we're so used to seeing Victorian pictures of our ancestors, and they are sepia, 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 and that's the only colour that we see our ancestors in. So suddenly, a book like this with and you came across, which has all those fabric swatches from the Victorian era, suddenly we're have the potential to see kind of what their wardrobe might have looked like. So I think you said 1838 is when she started to keep her journal, didn't she? And then did she keep it for many decades?
It goes right up until the mid 1870s. So it covers those decades of the 19th century, which were the pace of change when it came to dress and textiles at that point was.
Can you imagine keeping up any kind of hobby for like 40 years?
Yeah. I've thought about that, and and she says like when the scrapbook kind of ends and but Anna's still alive, and you kind of wonder, like, was she just tired of doing it? Like, was it not important to her for some reason? But also the fact that there is this major change and people are starting to get like that ready to wear department store experience is just starting to come in,
Or as Kate points out, maybe fabrics just aren't as important in that part of her life at that point.
Yeah. Maybe they were trying to downsize and she just, yeah.
So rapid, and it reflects all of these tastes in fabric and color and pattern, and it really is incredibly vibrant. It's the most, because the swatches have been trapped in the pages and kept away from light, they've retained all of their color, and so they are just absolutely it's a complete kaleidoscope.
And I think so. You wrote this brilliant phrase in your book, and you were saying about how so the album starts at the very commencement of Queen Victoria's reign and maps those momentous decades of everything that came to be Victorian. And you said it's a parallel life synonymous with industry and empire. And I think that's one of the extraordinary things that, almost from, not a humble, because she's quite a well-to-do, kind of comfortably off woman, wasn't she? But still very much an ordinary Victorian woman. She wasn't an aristocrat or anything, but still her journal reflects this huge change of industry and empire and all the kind of global network and how textile weaves into that. So what can you tell us about kind of the sense of, or some of the discoveries that particularly piqued your curiosity as you came to realize this?
Well, finding out who Anne was sort of the key moment of the book, really, because there's over 2,000 swatches in the book.
I still can't get over that.
None of them are written in the first person. None of them say, oh, this is my dress, or this is, apart from one. So I just found this one example where she wrote Anne Sykes' dress above, and every one of the swatches has a little caption above it, but it would just say something like Emma's sash 1843 or Mrs. Gregg's bonnet ribbon, something like that. So they're very sparse, very short sort of little captions. And Anne appears a lot, but never in the first person. So it was only this one swatch of cotton that said the first dress I wore in Singapore, Anne Sykes. And so that was the one that kind of located her and meant that then it became possible to find out about all of the other, her life. And so it does cover, because I was then able to use the census records in terms of like genealogy, and found out her marriage certificate. She married a merchant called Adam Sykes in 1838. And then once, as you know, I'm sure many of your readers know, once you've found that sort of hook, it kind of opens up everything. And I was able then to find many things about them and their family and friends through the records. So they moved to Singapore in 1840. Adam had a heading up a merchant operations there. So they lived there for 7 years. They came back to Lancashire, which was where she was from, in around 1850. And then I was able to follow them through the records for the rest of their lives around Lancashire. And it was just incredible to map the things that were there in the diary, the fabrics and the people, there were many different names, against the records that you could find and actually try and build their lives that way.
And I mean, I think you said there were over 100 people. So yeah, that does give, obviously you can't trace everybody because sometimes it's just frustratingly doesn't become possible, does it? But still to kind of gain that feeling of her lifestyle. And I think what struck me as well, you said out of those 2,000 plus fabric swatches, only 70 or so related to men's clothing. So this is very much kind of history turned on its head, where the documentary evidence is largely related to kind of the female sphere.
That's an interesting thing, you know, because I know that we know that she mentions it in the book a couple times, I think, but I hadn't thought about it that way, that it is kind of flipping the script of like who cares about the men's stuff.
Well, I have to say, like, it makes me, considering that textiles in general dominate, right, the human experience, but I would definitely say they dominate the female experience far more
absolutely.
than the male experience. And you know what's very interesting too is I understand, like, Kate is probably sick of Anne at this point because she's been like researching her for years and years and like really like in the nitty gritty and the thing. But you know what's funny is she's talking about her like she's telling her family history. You know, like,
well,
so my grandma Kate, like,
yeah, I mean, having done the deep dive on somebody who's not related to me, you do, even though like she says, you don't know like what her temperament was like. We don't, and of course we don't even know what she looked like because there is no picture of her or painting or anything. But you don't really know a whole lot about her. But I kind of experienced the same thing when I was doing all my deep dive research on Dr. Dunton, because
he became a boyfriend.
Yes, he became my quilt boyfriend. Now, I'm lucky enough to have, know a few things about, like, what his voice sounded like, what his, because he sang, what his personality was like, because people talked about it. We know what he looked like, but still.
You got to watch actual, like, arguments with people in letter.
Yeah. But just, and the experience of, like, going to his gravesite, all that kind of stuff, like, I could really understand where she was coming from with that sort of experience of researching somebody who's not your family member, but you get to know them in a way that it's almost like they are.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's been something that's always, these are the, when I was reading about Singapore, for example, at that time, and the people that were forging a life out there, the European community, and it is a sort of tale of empire, and that very often the traditional histories are all about the men who were building theatres and subscribing to charitable causes and sitting on juries and things like that. And you never ever hear the women's stories, and they're there. They are with their husbands. They're going with them to the theatre, or they're living their life, but they just don't ever make it into the written accounts. And so that was really, it did feel as though, although, as you say, Anne wasn't, they were a well-to-do couple, but nonetheless, you wouldn't ordinarily hear Anne's story.
Definitely, I think that's something we'd all very much relate to as family historians. And she was, like, very dedicated to this, wasn't she? So she kept it up for many decades. And I noticed elsewhere in your book, you said it kind of really felt to you as it ties into the Victorian craze for collecting anything and everything. So whether you were kind of formally collecting it for a scientific body, or just the crazes that people had at home to kind of catalogue, collect, and it's kind of such a different era from all of our previous generations of ancestors. It's kind of the first generation, or the first few generations, which have suddenly getting a lot of stuff, material kind of culture in their lives, aren't they?
Yes, it's very much about that. It was her way of sort of charting all the things around her. So where other people might have been documenting different varieties of insect or whatever it might be, she was charting fabrics. And I think for her, it was a way of capturing moments in time and the people around her, because some of the people are in her life for all of her life. So family members, sisters-in-law, her brothers, Adam. But then other people just appear fleetingly, and so you do get that sense of brief acquaintances, and rather than collect autographs or poems, which women often did at this time, she chose to ask for pieces of cloth. And that,
what's interesting is, so this is one of the, I don't remember if she really talks about people being really acquaintance or not. Like, she makes a point to point out the people, they're clearly close. I've got all this research that says that, but right. I don't know that I hear her much talk about, like, well, this person's just an acquaintance. But can you imagine, like, acquaintances now and be like, can I have a parrot? Can I have a snippet of your knickers? Like, put in my hobby book.
I love your dress. I have a pair of scissors. I love your dress. Come here.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you, like it'd be one thing to even say that to your friends at this point. Can you imagine saying it to acquaintances even at this time? Because I'm thinking, like, you have all these, there's way more rules that dominate society at this time than now.
Absolutely.
Like, people say completely unhinged things all the time now, like, I can't say I'm real surprised. But at this point, since there's, like, really hard and fast rules
there really
on
are.
the layers of society, I would think it would be so impertinent to ask someone for a piece of their clothing.
Come here, Jill. Come here. Yes, you are absolutely right. And yesterday I read a piece from the English Women's Domestic magazine called How to Keep a Husband, and it starts off where she's like, there's a few things about him that bother me, but I'll change him once we're married. You know how that goes. But she didn't like the fact that when he referred to a married woman, when you should call her Mrs., he would just he would just say Miss. And she was like, that's vulgar. You cannot call a married woman Miss. It's vulgar. And I was like, Okay, I'm glad when people refer to me as anything but "Hey you" or the B word. I mean,
Interesting.
yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. Like, how do you approach somebody that's just an acquaintance to give you?
Yeah, how do you approach someone to steal pieces of their clothing?
Well, and I mean, again, we're going back to the fact that I mean, with the exception maybe of the sashes and the ribbons, where you could just like clip a little piece of the end of it. The clothing, it's the pieces that are in there. They have to be scraps from the garment construction. I mean, unless you're talking about a dress that's got a big deep hem, she's not grabbing the back of somebody's outfit and going like,
I kind of wish she had, because it would just be such a cool story. Continuing on.
That was her way of kind of remembering all of the people around her.
And you mentioned as well that she was a consumer of fashion rather than a dressmaker, because at the start, when there was that mystery, you didn't know kind of what role she would take. So did you get a sense from your fashion history knowledge and from what she collected, was she very contemporary? Did she like the newest thing? What was that, her taste? Did she like the latest thing out?
I think she was. What you get a sense of, I think often there's this sort of myth that fashion just happens to people who live in London, and that on the fringes, that isn't something that interests everybody, which it doesn't. I mean, I'm sure not everybody in the book was particularly bothered about being fashionable, but I think when you look at Anne's, the colours that she was choosing, the patterns that evolved as you go through the centuries. In 1870s, she records one, it says Anne Sykes's Polonaise. Well, Polonaise was a very fashionable style of dress in the 1870s. And so she really was keeping up with prevailing cycles of style and taste. So yeah, I think so. She cloth mattered to her. Her father was a cotton spinner in Lancashire. He owned 4 mills. And so she had grown up in the heart of the textile manufacturing world of England at that time, and I think she really valued it.
And I noticed that you've written another book, The Dress History of Queen Alexandra. So how much of a different journey has this been to write this book and research this book, as opposed to a history relating to Queen Alexandra?
I'd never done any family history before, so I suppose the main difference is that Alexandra's life is very, very well documented. There aren't really many hidden corners, because there are so many letters and accounts and biographies, and in many ways her life is documented, and what the dress was doing was almost finding out those very few things that weren't immediately apparent from the kind of public sources. So there was a dress that charted, it had a very odd fastening at the back, and I was able to sort of find out about a curvature that she had in her spine. And so there's all sorts of things that dress tells you, but in that particular case it wasn't, the family history is well established, there weren't any mysteries there. And what the difference with the Anne Sykes book is this idea that you had these very intimate scraps, dressing gowns, her Adam's bedroom slippers, and things that were right at the heart of their life, but the tiniest, merest details, and actually then trying to find them in amongst all of the many Anne Sykeses and all the possible people that could have been in there, trying to just piece that life back together when you don't have very much of it, was probably the biggest challenge.
And so you say in the book as well that it is quite rare, and you mentioned a book by Barbara Johnson, who I think was a Georgian, and you said it was at the V&A. So these are real treasures, really, aren't they? They're not unique, but they are so few and far between that there must be so many different stories to be told from Anne's book.
Yes, I think probably there were more of them. I don't think she was necessarily unique in keeping this. Maybe fewer women made them, but there are certainly a handful of them in the United States that I've found in various museums. I think it's just that very often this kind of thing wasn't valued as a practice, and so they probably got thrown away, or well, like this one, ended up on a junk stall, and it was really just fortuitous that it didn't get disposed of or cut up, or so I think there probably were more of them, and they just weren't given the same kind of value as other sorts of artistic outputs. So I think that's partly why it's such a rarity now. And it does tell these fabulous stories.
And so in the book, so obviously you describe all of this, and you describe the connections, but where will you go to actually see images of the textiles? Like, are you going to be able to put some of them online, or do an exhibition?
So the book is published by Chatto Vintage, which is part of Penguin Random House, and they've got on their website, they have put together some images of just a few of the pages from the book, which they had photographed. It was amazing, actually. I took the diary to some very clever people with a photographic studio, that they had a special camera that could come down and photograph, because the book's quite large, and take really great high resolution images of it in situ. So it was so there have been some nice photographs taken of it, and
but Kate, not enough, Kate, we need more.
That'd be good to go and explore as well. So you mentioned the book is published by Chatto, and it costs £22.
All right, that's the last 29 seconds, so they're probably just gonna talk shop there. But
I'm glad we got to see those extra images, and yeah.
Oh, stop. You know what's nice though is, like, even though we didn't do our own interview this time,
I'm glad we got to see one, and yeah, I'll have to look at some of those others. But yeah, that was cool to hear her talk about it, and
another one bites the dust. It's interesting though that she's got that other dress history of
I knew I had seen that she had written another book, but once I fell into this one, I didn't really think about it much more. But yeah, I'll have to check out what her other book is about, and that's interesting. I mean, again, like the interviewer was asking her about, how is that different, and yeah, I mean, in that case, she's looking at a person that tons and tons of information about her, but looking at some of those little specifics of the actual garments themselves. That sounds interesting.
Yeah. Well, we've gone quite a bit over, which we knew we would, because we had extra stuff, we had end stuff. It's just the way the cookie crumbles. But so as a reminder, next Tuesday we're going to do an auction preview, which we haven't done in a while because we've been busy doing other stuff, and it's you don't want to miss it, because like it's going to be relevant to things we were looking at here. And then on Saturday, we have a Stitch and Glitch. Tomorrow, we're going to release the link to purchase tickets to see the lecture by Pam Weeks, because we're going to start our new book after that, which will give the first assignment for that book on April 15th. So between now and April 15th is when you want to get that. And you want to email Pam to get it for $35, shipping included. You can have it autographed, and you want to email her at pamela.weeks@gmail.com. And she is ready and waiting to receive emails. Let us know, please, if you are emailing her to buy the book, just so that I can make sure that she, it doesn't go to spam or something like that, and we can be like, hey, we know somebody emailed you. And please do support her. I know it's definitely probably cheaper to buy it used somewhere else, and I get it, but we always try to
let's support Pam. Yeah, we definitely and you get it signed and you get it directly from her. So
yeah. And I think that's it. I'm gonna go eat.
Okay.
I haven't eaten.
I eat dinner at like 5, like an old person. Or I probably shouldn't say that like too terribly loud. I got in the habit of eating like, the early bird hours, because I was with my dad, and he eats at like.
Oh, I mean, I used to eat before we did stream. I don't really know what happened where I just started eating after, but it is what it is. So we're gonna have a break now from books for a while, and we're gonna look at other stuff, because we have stuff sitting in the back end that we need to look at. So I'm actually really enjoying this new
our new
calendar that we're doing here. And we're not just book to book to book to book, because after stuff like a Tallulah Bottoms kind of story, man, you need a break.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Alrighty, my dear Cake. I
My
miss
dear
you.
Jill, I'm glad to be back.
Yay.
Oh, gnocchi and meatball soup. That sounds good, Robin.
Oh. Hey, everybody, we're going to Robin's house. See you in 15.
That's sort of like, no, people are starting to knock on Robin's door. And she's like, no, I did not invite you.
And I did not get the Entenmann's ready.
All right, guys, we will see you soon. Either Thursday on my stream or this weekend on the Stitch and Glitch or next Tuesday.